Hey guys, it's Charlie and Ben. We're going to show you how to make a shelf for your R-Pod today. So first I want to show you what the finished product looks like. Here we've got a shelf, and I know that it looks like the weight is on these little curtain covers, valances, whatever you call them, but that's actually not what's happening. We've got sticky rug backing on this, and we've got tension bolts in there that are pushing against the sides. So most of the weight of this shelf is actually supported by the sticky pads and the tension against the walls. And then if you look underneath, you can see that I've got reinforced oak cross beams, and I did that to help these stay stiff when they had a load on them. This is like an $8 rack from Lowe's, and these pieces of wood, I think these are 1x2s, but we can get into all that in a minute. But anyway, that's what the finished product looks like, and you can see it fits those 12-inch cube storage bins, and that's what we wanted for our trip. Because the roof curves down, they won't fall down behind. Even if they slip off, there's no way for them to fall, you see. So we could actually, I think, travel with these just like this. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it on this side too, on the master bedroom. So this is where we're going, right there. Yeah. Okay, let's get started. What I have here is a 6-foot long length of shelf, and I'll just tell you this is Rubbermaid, 12 inches by 6 feet. And then I have some 9-foot lengths of oak, and let's take a look at what this is here. Okay, Charlie just measured it. It's right there at 8 feet. So yeah, these are 8-foot lengths, and the reason I got them a little long is I wanted a little extra length because I knew I wanted to make some cross beams. And so with this extra length, you can make a couple cross beams out of these. The other piece of wood you need is over here. This is your spacers that go on the sides. And this piece of wood, let's see, what did this start out being? Okay, this was, where is it? 3/4 by 2, but how long was it? Oh, by 6 feet. So this was a 6-foot length when I started. I've already cut a few spacers from it. So you need all of this to get started. Now let's look at the other hardware you need. So you'll also need T-nuts, threaded T-nuts with prongs in them. You see those prongs, those are gonna go into the wood. And then you need 4 elevator bolts. So you need 4 T-nuts and 4 elevator bolts for your project. And you're going to need some way to secure the wire rack to the wood. I used some metal plumber's tape here, and I bought some snips at Walmart for $4.99, and I'll show you where those go. You're going to be securing the rack to the wood, and I know it doesn't look great, but I wanted to do something that wasn't gonna come undone. So you're gonna need that. You need a few drill bits, and I have some self-tapping wood screws here, but don't believe it. Drill your pilot holes anyway. And if you screw up, you might need some wood glue. You'll also need a little boring tool, and I'll show you where I used that. I used that to recess the elevator bolts into the wood just a little bit. I thought that looked a little nicer, and it keeps those elevator bolts from slipping around. So you'll need that. The last thing I can think of that you need is, if you want, a little power saw, and you probably want your cordless drill. Oh yeah, and a hammer, and a tape measure, and a pencil. All right, let's get started. Now just to get started, you might want to confirm the width here. I've got about 74, maybe 74.5, something like that. That's about right. That's going to be fine. And one thing that you're going to notice also, at least in my rig, is this thing is already super wobbly. So definitely we don't want to put weight on that. In fact, I'm probably going to snug this up, and the tension rod, the tension of the shelf is probably going to actually hold that on better. Taking a little 6-foot measurement here, I'm just going to draw a line. Okay, there we go. There's the line. So that's 72 inches. We measured 74 and a half on the thing. So that's going to leave about 1.25 inches on each side. That's fine because the thickness of this wood is 3/4. So that leaves 3/4 of an inch for the elevator bolts. It's going to work out perfectly. So the next thing we do is we get a helper to hold the ends because we're going to saw through this and we don't want the ends to just drop and break off. So here's my little I don't even know what this is called. Is this a band? This isn't a band saw. I don't know what this is. But here we go. Here we go. And I've got Charlie holding on to the end. Uh-oh, we're running out of power. Okay, yeah, best laid plans, right? This is what I was trying not to do. You see that? That's what I was trying not to do. So one extra step you might consider is make sure you have a fresh battery in your saw before you start. If you're like me and barely have the right tool for the job, you can just use some snips like this to snip off the extra wood. I did a pretty good job there. That's not gonna affect us really at all. Okay, so we charged up our saw again. Like I said, make sure you have a fresh battery when you start. We're gonna make that last cut now. Charlie's holding on to the piece. The nice thing about using a saw like this is you get nice clean cuts on your edges, nice flat cuts that, you know, like they're not angled, and that can be important because I noticed some weird angles as I was trying to fit stuff together. We're going to keep these two leftover lengths for our cross beams later. We'll cut them down a little bit, but first we need to make sure that we have our two main pieces here. So now I've just laid the shelf on these two. Notice how they're standing up long ways. That's going to create more support so that it doesn't bow when you put weight on it. Now I want the edge of the rack to be on the edge of the wood on both sides like that. So now I need to measure the distance in between. All right, so Charlie's got a measurement here. It looks like about 10.5 inches to me. So that's how long we need to make these cross beams. And so one's going to go here, and then another one's going to go, you know, about here. We're going to do 4 of them across. So let's do that. Okay, we've measured 10.5 and then another 10.5. So we'll have another chunk left over, which is almost the same size as the previous one I did. So now I'm going to make those cuts. If I look really closely here, I can see that the saw has kind of chewed on the ends. So if you're having that same kind of problem where your ends are just getting chewed on like that, you can just run a little sandpaper over it. I would just lay the sandpaper down and just drag it a couple times like this. You don't have to do too much, but that'll clean up all of the little splintery ends on it, and it'll just make the whole thing a little easier to work with. These spacers are now looking really good, and now we're going to put them on. So the next step is we're going to put these screws through here and into the spacers. Now before we do that, we have to drill a pilot hole. If you don't drill a pilot hole, it will crack the wood open, even though these are self-tapping screws. So don't be fooled by the self-tapping bit. Okay, and the other thing we have to remember is that these elevator bolts are going in about this far. So the supporting screws have to be above and below that. So I've got my drill ready to go. The first thing I'm going to do is line these up just as good as I possibly can, and I need to hold them in this alignment. Now this is a little bit tough. You might even like to use a clamp or something like that, but I'm just going to do it this way just to prove to you that it can be done. So I'm drilling all the way through. There we go, there's one pilot hole. We want to do what's called a countersink. And a countersink is where you get a drill bit that's just about the size of the screw head. And we're going to drill a larger hole, but not very deep. Just zoom in on that, Charlie, and show them that. So we're just boring out just about that much, not much more. And now when we put the screw in, it will go in flush with the wood. And that's important for aesthetics, not much important for much else. Okay, so now I'm holding this really tight. I'm drilling it in, and bingo, you see it went flush with the wood there, just like we talked about. So now that I've done that first one, I'm going back here and doing my second pilot hole, and that's going to be down low. So you pull the wood right to the edge of the table so that you have a lot of room to work, and then you drill that pilot hole just like that. Now you drill your countersink hole. Just bore this thing out a little bit, just like that. And now you put on your star bit. So again, we're holding super tight, we're drilling this in, and bang, there it is. There's our countersink and everything. And now the drill bit is stuck, well, or the star bit is stuck, there we go. That's what one of the corners looks like. Okay, so now that we've done one side, we're gonna flip it over and do the exact same thing on the other side. Good, got that done. Now that we've gotten that side done, we want to take the whole thing and turn it over so that we have a nice stable rectangle. So I'm doing the same thing on this side, but this time you can see that it's kind of narrowing, and that's because this wood isn't exactly straight. So I'm just going to insert it in there. I'm not going to worry if that puts a little pressure on it. There we go. So now we need to figure out where to put these last two spacers. This is 72 inches long exactly. 72 divided by 3 is 24 inches. So 24 inches in from each side should be the middle of these supports. And you don't even have to get it exact. So we're going to drill these same types of holes on these two center spacers. I'm not going to show you that part. We're just going to do it and then resume the video. Okay, so I have secured the two center stays, and I did exactly the same thing as I showed you on the ends. And you can see it's not even totally even, because this is not my profession, this is not my expertise. But I did the same thing on the ends. The only difference is you can put these closer together if you want to, because there's no elevator bolt has to fit through these. On these end pieces, way over here, remember the elevator bolt has to go through them like this. So we're gonna have to be drilling into the ends. Now at this point, if you're feeling like it's too good to be true, that you've made yourself a rack support, you can take it in there and set it on top of those curtains and just kind of see it rest there, and it's kind of a cool experience. Okay, the next thing we need to do is these elevator bolts in the end. So let me show you how these work. Here is a T-nut with these little spikes on it. This is going to go into the wood here and grab on, and then the elevator bolt goes into it like this. This way you can adjust the spacing and the tension with a little wrench that fits that head right there. So that's what we're planning to do. Now, in order to do this, we need to drill a pilot hole into the wood that is big enough to cover the outside of the shaft, and you can see that this drill bit will do just fine. So we're going to use this drill bit. Some people start with a smaller pilot hole, and the reason you start with a smaller pilot hole is it's easier to find the center, but it's also easier to drill this hole, get that much wood out of it, and then come back with a larger drill bit to drill the larger hole. And now you're not trying to drill through so much wood at once. So I'm going in far enough that this bolt fits all the way in so that it can be flush against the wood there. If that fits, then I know that I can screw this all the way in even with this T-bolt on it. And I also want to make sure that the T-bolt fits in there, and it does. So that's a great hole. I'm going to do the same thing on all 4 sides. So the way I'm doing this is I'm looking to see where those teeth are going to set in, and I'm making sure that they're all setting in where they're not near the edge of the board if I can avoid it. So that looks like a good spot right about there. And once they're in, these elevator bolts should go in pretty easily. Like, you shouldn't meet really any resistance. Are the pieces that are going up, they're pushing up against the sides of the R-pod wall, and the elevator bolts are pushing into them. Now, I want these to be at least 16 inches long, and the only reason I say that is I just feel like that's more surface area for it to push against, so that no one part of the wall is taking too much pressure. So I'm just going to measure my 16s here. All right, now you can see that the saw really chewed up the ends here, and so I am going to take that piece of sandpaper and clean those ends up. Okay, I've got all 4 elevator bolts in, and now the next step is I want to line up these spacers so that they're just about well, spaced evenly like this and in the middle, so kind of centered left to right and top to bottom. And that looks about right to me. Now, because we're doing these freehand, we're not using any complex measurements or anything like that, each of these sides is going to be unique. So where these are drilled and how far apart they're spaced on here is going to be unique. This is always going to have to go this way on this side. And same with the other side. So first we'll get this one going. We take the 1-inch boring bit, and you center it here. You can kind of look down on it to make sure that it looks like it's following that circle. And then you give it a little drill, and you're just trying to drill just enough of a recess here, just like that. You're just trying to drill that much so that your elevator bolt can fit in there. Great, so we have drilled both of the recesses that we needed, and you'll see, bring the camera around, you'll see that it fits on perfectly, just like that. That's gonna really hold this thing in place when you put it up there, and then when these elevator bolts push, hopefully they're pushing with a wider surface here, so that you're not just pushing 2 elevator bolts into your walls, but you're pushing something, and something larger, and with any luck it's going across a stud in the wall so that you have even more support. So this feels pretty good to me. Let's do the same thing on the other side. So here we are on the other side, fresh wood. We're going to do the same thing, space it in the middle, top to bottom, left to right. Okay, I've drilled those recesses. And now let's make sure they fit, and indeed they do. That's nice. Yeah, I like how that fits. Okay, and they don't, by the way, they don't even need to be the same depth. Okay, you want to try to get them even and like flat in there if you can. The next step is to fasten your wire shelf to the frame that you made. And to do this, we're going to use some little strips of plumbing tin like this. This is called plumbing tape. We're going to lay it down and screw it in like that. And we're going to do one here, one in the center, one on this side, and then 2 on the other side. So in total, you'll need 5 lengths like this. To get 5 lengths like that, you need some tin snips. Tin snips are the key to this part of the exercise. You count 3 holes in, you snip, 3 holes in, snip, 3 holes in, snip, 3, snip, and I think now we have 5. Okay, it's time to drill some pilot holes. I'm going to drill my 2 pilot holes, and I'm going to get one of these pieces put on first, and that's going to hold it in place for the other one. So there's one pilot hole, there's another pilot hole. All right. These aren't really the right kind. You'd probably want some screws that don't bevel in like that, but I'm going to use these anyway because I have them laying around. So I'm just going to tighten this down. All right, now we will move all the way to the other side. So I'm going to flip this around, and I got to be careful because it's still delicate. It's not, you know, reinforced yet. But I'm going to flip it around and do this end. And before I do it, I'm going to size up these little snips I have remaining, and it's going to go right about here. I see some hanging over a little bit, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to trim some off of each side. If I had measured more carefully and these spacers were even just a 1/4 inch shorter or a 1/2 inch shorter, I wouldn't need to do this step. But it's easy to do, and it'll still provide plenty of strength. So there, that fits nicely. I'm going to do it 1 over right there. So again, it's pilot holes and then screwing. So first, pilot hole. Here's one, and here's the other. All right. And now I'll pull a couple of my extra screws that I have from a previous project. Get it started. Tighten it down. Tighten it down. Okay, now more snips and more holes. I'm going to pause the video and do the rest of these. These here, I had to do something super squirrely. You can even see there's like the screws coming through on the other side. I really don't like this, but this bar was supposed to be on the edge. So basically this whole frame is a little bit too wide. It's about, I would say it's about, well, it's at least a 1/4 inch too wide, but maybe even a full, you know, 1/2 inch too wide. So yeah, I don't love that, but anyway, that's where it is, and it'll work. It'll work for what we're doing. Okay, so then the next step is to put some sticky backing on these spacers, like $4 at Walmart. It's just this this stuff that you put under rugs, this kind of sticky stuff. You just find it where all of their throw rugs are and stuff. And then you cut it to size, you peel off the yellow backing and you stick it down. And then there's also a clear backing that we're gonna leave on while we size it up for fit over there. That's the other helper, K. 2 spacers. We have not peeled off the sticky part here. We're just going to figure out which one goes on which side. So to do that, I'm going to set this one here and see if it fits, and it does. So that's for that side. I want the lip facing out, so this works perfectly. I'm just going to set it on the top of the curtain there, and then the other one, I've got to flip this around, because in addition to knowing which side is which, you have to know which end is up. And not that it should make too much of a difference, but I think that is how that one works. Yep. So I'm taking it this way and I'm putting it on the other window right there. And I think those are the same. So we're bringing the shelf in here, and we're just gonna set it on top. Hold on here. Let's get it in there first. So my side plugs in fine. So this looks like it'll work, and then you take a little bit of a step back and you just see if that works.
You observe your glorious job.
Yeah, you want to take some bins.
Grab any bin.
You want to do whatever bin size you want and just test it to see if it fits in there. You don't want them, if they happen to slide off the back and travel, you don't want them to fall. So that's actually maybe a little, maybe we want this set back just a bit on these, so you can still get them out just fine, but if they slide back, they don't go back as far. So probably about like this. So you see I'm leaving like that much space on each side, and that's going to be about right for this shelf. The other thing I want to make sure of is that if I sit here, I'm not hitting my head on anything. This feels pretty good. I don't think this is going to be a problem for me when I sleep or anything like that. We're going to lose some of this light.
Close the door, Charlie.
We're going to lose some of this light if we have bins up there, but that's okay too. So I feel good about this, and I may even hang a dowel down here to make like a closet rod to hang short clothes. You can just push them all the way over when you're sleeping. They're not going to bug you when you're sleeping, and that'll give us a lot more storage in this little R-Pod. So now that we have figured this part out, we'll take the weight off of it. We'll take the adhesive backing off of those pieces of wood, off of those spacers, and we'll put them back exactly where we found them. Clear backing, and we've set them back up there. Now it's time to get them seated in and tighten up everything. We're going to use a little tiny wrench like this. It didn't come with the kit. You just got to find something small, and you just lift it up until it gets seated in there, and then you start tightening. So now this is seated in here, and we've got it seated in the recesses on both sides. The elevator bolts are seated in the recesses on both sides. You have double sticky carpet padding backing here, so the pressure pushing here against the wall and the stickiness is going to carry most of the weight. This will not carry most of the weight. I'm sure it'll carry some, but once it's seated in, you really want to crank it down, and not so much that you explode your walls or anything, but you want to make sure that these spacers are really making solid contact with the wall. And you can push from either side. It doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to even out these elevator bolts, but if you want to, you can. So this feels really good to me, really stable, and I can see that it's moving a little bit, but that sticky backing is helping it. So I think we're ready to try putting some storage bins on here to see what happens. It feels quite stable though. Like, that's not going anywhere. That fits in just right. And this fits in just right as well. I'm curious what happens even over the smoke detector. They can still come in and out, so that worked out great. And yeah, even if they shift during travel, if you choose to keep them up there, which some people do, some people don't, but if you choose to, you can keep them up there. And because this is 6 feet wide and these boxes are 10.5 inches wide, you can fit at least 60 or 6 of them. That's it. Now we're going to Walmart and we're gonna get the rest of the bins, fill them in, get packed, and go on our trip.